sometimes the person who's the furthest in the journey isn't the right fit for you. So taking myself as an example, we paid off a lot of debt. We've been on this personal finance journey for 20 years now. You could say, well, she's the most experienced, so I should hire her to help me pay off debt. Mm-hmm. Honey, that's been a long time ago.
Yeah.
I barely even remember that.
Yeah! What's up, everybody? Your life alchemist, your dragon. Welcome to Alchemize Life. I'm your host, Justin David Carl. This is a show where I seek out and share expertise, wisdom, and thought leadership in all domains with the mission of empowering and inspiring you to proactively design and truly live a life worth living. We're all in this together, and when we do the work together, we go so much farther, so much faster, and have so much more fun. Without further ado, let's dig into this episode and alchemize life. Jillian Johnsrud, welcome to the show. So good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we first met at Camp Phi in Joshua Tree, I believe back in 2018. Seems like just the other, year to me, but also so far away because, we've had a pandemic and so much go on. Mm-hmm. And just to kind of set the scene for the audience, you were a really big inspiration to me during my Phi journey because back when you wrote on Montana Money Adventures, I just was so inspired by your writing and kind of your personal journey to financial independence. And, you just had such a fun and accessible way for me to learn about financial independence as I was kind of starting my journey at the beginning of 2018, because I had just discovered the concept of Phi at the very, very end of 2017. So huge thank you for being an inspiration on my own journey. And just to kind of introduce you to the audience, you are many, many things. You wear many hats, but you're an author. We're going to talk about your book. You're a coach. You're a blogger. You're a podcaster. You're a mother of 5 at home. You're financially independent. You do a lot of mini retirements, which we're going to talk about what that even is. I mean, you travel half the year, so we got a lot to cover, but I'm really excited to share your journey with the audience. So big thank you for coming on today.
I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I would love to kind of kick things off with your entrepreneurial financial independence journey. I think you have a really fascinating story, especially the fact that you have several children and you were able to go down that path, because one of the common, I'll call it an excuse for people not to pursue financial independence is, oh, well, I have kids. That's not something I could even entertain. So I'd love to hear, how you, discovered financial independence, how you pursued it, and, how you started to become an entrepreneur along that journey.
Wow, that's a big question. Which one should we start with?
Let's start with Phi, because from my understanding, you did it while you were working, 9 to 5 jobs, at least initially. And you and your husband were not on board with money in the first few years together. You didn't quite know how to talk about money, but then you started to become, get more aligned after the first couple of years. So I think that's a great place to start is first and foremost, how did you and your husband start to get aligned on the shared money journey?
Yeah. So my husband and I came from very different backgrounds and very different mindsets. He came from a very kind of middle class to educated professional parents, kind of upper middle class income. They ate out a lot. They did a lot of shopping, just kind of a normal I don't know, probably pretty typical American lifestyle. And I came, we kind of grew up like right near the poverty line. And it was it was it was a little bit of a chaotic family environment, but it was a lot of struggle. And there had been a point when I was about 12, my mom was married to my stepdad. And I just came to her and I said, listen, we can't do this. Like this relationship, this household, like this isn't healthy. It doesn't feel safe. Like we have to leave. I don't care where we go. I don't care what we do. We can live in the little studio apartment above the gas station, kind of thing. Like, but we just can't stay here.
Yeah.
And she is a very pragmatic woman. And she was like, Jillian, I can't afford to raise 3 kids on my own. Like that's not an option. And I just went upstairs and I cried hot tears into my pillow. But I also had this realization of the function of money in my life, which is, money gives you options. Money gives you choices. And right now, I desperately want more choices and more options. Like I never want to feel this stuck again. And so I became very passionate about saving money, about earning money, just kind of stocking away $5, $20 at a time, whatever I could do, to where I moved out after my junior year of high school. And by the time I graduated, I had like almost $9,000.
Wow.
Which felt like a million. Like it just felt like growing up, we never had money to fill the gas tank up. Like I remember once my whole childhood having a full tank of gas, and that's because someone else filled up the gas tank. And I was like, this is crazy. I've never seen that little stick over on the F. Like, what is happening? And so I kind of brought that energy to our marriage. And my husband he had lots of credit card debt. He had taken out lots of student loans. Like he was eating out 3 or 4 times a week, thinking he was like doing the financially responsible thing because it was fast food. And I was like, oh, buddy, we have to have like a come to Jesus moment on this, like, because I am not doing that. And thankfully, he was really on board with paying down his debt. He kind of liked things in theory, like he liked the idea in theory, but we kind of set out some advice someone told me when we were about to get married. They said, you guys have each been living on your own and, paying your own bills. When you get married, just save one of your incomes. Just save half. Because then, if you decide to have kids or daycare or buy our house or whatever, like you'll have more choices. You'll have more options. And I was like, ooh, choices, options. Yes, that sounds like a fantastic plan. So we started on this, okay, let's pay off our debt. Let's just save half of our money right from the beginning. And it's funny in that, like, I had this really specific vision for what life could look like having more financial freedom. And I don't think he saw it for a long time. I don't think he really saw it until like we were almost there, which is important to understand. Like not everyone's going to have the same vision that you have and see the things that you see. But at least like in the practicality, it took a few years for us to really understand each other and to have empathy towards each other. But just that money communication is something that we can grow in. It's something it's probably one of my favorite exercises to do with coaching clients. If it's a couple that is not seeing eye to eye on money, and there's just like a lot of tension because they don't understand each other, I have a series of questions about your money stories. What was the first memories you had of money? How do you remember your parents feeling about money? How did they spend money? Like, what were their money patterns? And it's amazing because it only takes, like an hour. Both people only spend half an hour telling their money stories, but at the end, they're like, oh, I get you now. I get why you feel this way. I get why you're stressed when I do this with our money. I get why you feel scared when I spend this way or because I want to save this. Like, it's one of those things I think every couple can grow in, because those aren't the stories we tell very often. We tell stories about holidays, we tell stories about vacations, we tell stories about family traditions and about school friends. And so you might know all of these stories of your, partner's childhood, but do you know their money stories?
Yeah. It's so true. It's like, we'll talk about, all the, the good memories that we had as kids, as well as like the more kind of, maybe some of the traumatic ones, but we often will stay away from money because it's just one of those topics that in our society isn't, really talked about a lot, at least at a deep personal level. I think there's a lot of surface talk, but in terms of going deep, that is really good. I think you're giving me inspiration for my own marriage, because we've had lots of money talks, but I think that framework of here's some questions to talk about, it would be worth, some of which we've covered, but some of which maybe we haven't gone into depth on in a long time, would just bring so much more understanding into, our money marriage, so to speak, because, being married, whether or not your accounts are combined or separated, your money is still married in a sense, because you're sharing expenses, you're sharing a life together, and you're building a life together, which costs money. So I absolutely love that. Okay. So wanted to just make sure that the audience actually understands, what financial independence is for those who maybe just started listening to the show on this episode. How do you define financial independence?
Yeah, I think the simplest explanation is when your assets, and that could be retirement accounts or brokerage accounts or cash or real estate or rentals, or like my husband has a military pension, when your assets can cover your bills for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Then you're, not that you necessarily stop working or stop earning money, but paying the bills isn't the motivation. You have the money to pay the bills. And then, it's independence in that you do have those freedom and those choices and those options of, okay, what do you want to do with your life? If you don't have to pay the bills, how do you want to spend your time?
Yeah. So how did you get there? How did you and your husband actually get there?
Man, sometimes life surprises you. Sometimes I should say compound interest surprises you, because it's so hard to wrap your mind around how things compound. I think in any area of life, but for me, especially in finances. So when we started, I thought, man, if we could be financially independent by the time we're 60, that would be amazing. 60 is the goal. And then, we got a couple years in and I was like, I think we could do 55. I think we could do 55. And my husband's like, you're insane. This isn't happening. And I'm like, no, I think we can. And we end up becoming financially independent when I was 32 and he was 37.
Wow.
And it was I'll use just one little example of how these things kind of compounded and one led to another. When we lived in DC, high cost of living area, we rented a house. And the house had a rule, you couldn't have roommates, basically. But it had sat on the market for a while. So we said, hey, we'll rent this. We'll give you a long rental term. I think it was 2 or 3 years. We want a $200 discount on rent, and we want the possibility of having a roommate. And they were like, okay, fine. And then a week later, I was like, and we have a roommate. What do you think of this person? And they're like, yeah, he seems great. That's no problem. But that one choice saved us about $1,000 a month.
Wow.
Found that over 2.5 years. And we had $25,000, $30,000. We moved to Germany. We invested the money. Pretty good time. It was kind of this was 2008. We come back 2012. Now we have $40,000, $50,000. And we use that money to buy our first rental house, which we would not, without that cash, we would not have been able to afford it, because we didn't have jobs at the time. So we couldn't get a big mortgage to cover it. And then that rental house, all of the money, all the rent that brought in helped us buy our second rental house. So now we own 2 rental houses that combined create about $1,800 a month in rental income. That is a third of our monthly budget. And it's all because we made one choice 15, 16 years ago. That was a very uncommon choice. It was a choice that like none of our friends wanted to make. They're all like, we're real grown-ups. By the way, we had 2 kids at the time. So like there is that temptation, especially in DC, to be like, we're grown-ups and we're important and we're doing adult things, like, yeah, we're 24, but we're real grown-ups now. And so to like go back to having roommates, people were like, pass. Like, no, thank you. But I saw the potential of, you make this one good choice and it could give you options for more good choices down the line. Yeah.
That is, reflecting on my own FI journey, I live in the Bay Area where it's really high cost of living, probably higher than even DC. And one of the things my wife and I did, I would say somewhat to the chagrin of my wife, is we stayed in a place where the relative cost of rent was about half or less than what like it should have been renting for, or homes like our neighbors would be renting for. And that one decision compounded actually over, several years, empowered us to reach financial independence so much sooner than we thought. Because similar to you, when I started on the journey, I was like, okay, this is going to take me 7 to 15 years or more. But by being in the Bay Area where you're able to earn a lot of income, I was able to avoid lifestyle creep and actually become financially independent in about 2 years, which blew my mind. Yeah. Because if you had told me in the beginning of 2017 that I could reach financial independence in 2 years, first you'd have to tell me what financial independence was, because I'd be like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And then secondly, I would be like, yeah, right, that will probably take me until at least like 50 plus. So it's wild how those seemingly little decisions end up being these massive decisions that massively compound your entire journey and fast forward it. So that's really amazing. Couple questions. Where was that first house? Like, where did you purchase? What location was it in, if you don't mind me asking?
So it's in our local community. So we lived in Germany for 4 years because my husband was stationed there with the military. And then when he was medically retired, they were like, okay, where do you want us to drop off your stuff? Anywhere in the world. And we came back to Montana. We live just outside of Glacier National Park. So in the mountains. So we bought our primary residence, which is a whole nother story. And then we eventually bought 2 rentals, kind of all in the same town. So they're nice and close by, which I do like.
Yeah. And so you still just have 2 rentals, or you have more than that?
What we actually did, we moved into kind of a smaller-ish home. And then the second rental we bought was a larger home. It's 4 bedrooms, like 2,200 square feet, full garage, big yard, all the things. And then we rented it for 6 years. But with the intention that eventually our kids are going to get a little bit older and bigger and we might want some more space. But because it was like at the time the highest renting of our rentals, like we just kept it as a rental, lived in the cheaper place. And then in 2020, we moved in and have been fully renovating it.
Oh, so you're now in that second house, the 4-bedroom.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really awesome how you used it first to generate income, empower you to FI, and now it's like giving you an ability to, house a bunch of kids and, you know what I mean?
Yes. And man, with how the housing market shifted, the house is worth 3 or 4 times what we initially paid for it. So I'm so happy that we locked that in, knowing at some point in the next 5 or 10 years, like we'll want to make a change, but we locked it in at that lower price point because it would have been really tough to, afford this house at market value where we live right now.
Yeah, I feel like real estate is one of those things that, we're not finding more land until we colonize Mars. So it's kind of like, even if you have several bad years, eventually it's going to go up. And it's such a valuable investment. It's actually something I'm finally getting into. I'm not, heavily into it, but I've been considering getting more into it. But I think the thing that kind of scares me personally about it is like the time and energy to manage properties. So I'm a little curious, like, as you got that first and second home and were renting it out, did you manage it yourself or did you? Okay. And then like, how has that, and do you still manage it both?
We do all of the maintenance. We do all of the renovations. We do all of the management ourselves. And I would say the biggest weight of it is just kind of having that open loop. Having a responsibility out there that might demand your attention in the future. It's kind of like when people say like they're on call. Even if they don't work at all, they know they're on call. So it's a little bit, I would say that's probably the biggest thing is knowing you're kind of on call. But the actual renovation or management is really minimal. I would say on an average year, outside of true renovation, we probably spend 8 hours a year.
Okay. That's pretty low.
Yeah. I mean, and that includes the time to cash rent checks, which is probably a bulk of that 8 hours. So, yeah.
And they're long-term rentals, I assume, not like Airbnb.
No, they're long-term. And we picked houses that would be kind of low maintenance in that they're big enough houses, they have good storage, they're kind of designed for people to stay put. They're not like little one-bedroom studios where someone could move out in 4 hours. Like moving out of these houses would be an ordeal. And we price it a little bit low. We probably price it 20% below market value because then people don't have a big incentive to leave. It's not like they're going to find someplace cheaper out there. And we try to be really great and responsive. So like, we're not the reason they want to leave. And so we just we have hardly any turnover. And that's it's not the most profitable way to do it. Like, this is not like, how to be the most profitable in real estate. But we have 5 kids. We travel half the year. Like, this is what works for us.
Yeah. I love that you're so intentional about kind of your time and money. You don't optimize for maximum money. It seems like you optimize for like maximum like lifestyle while like factoring in like how do we, become and stay financially independent. And I think that's such a powerful combination or approach where a lot of people get caught up in like the default of like more money is always better, not thinking through the fact that like, what does that mean for your time and energy input? Like, does that mean like you're kind of like constantly having to find new residents because you're maxing out, like you're eking out the most rent you can get. And people are like, I think I want to move out because I can get a better deal. Whereas your tenants are like, wow, this is like 15 to 20%, lower. And I think that's one of the big reasons I stayed in, me and my wife stayed in the house we stayed in because we're like, wow, we could never get a 2-bedroom, 1-bath with a garage for this price. Like, we need to stay here. And we stayed for 9 years, even though we could have moved out after like 1 or 2 into a much, much nicer place. But we were also optimizing for ourselves, like just becoming financially independent. And that was a decision that we had to make. And, we watched our friends buy homes and get mortgages and move into nicer homes and buy brand new cars. And, we decided to kind of delay that. And it made all the difference. So I think your intention is I think that's one of the reasons I loved your writing so much or do love your writing is because you're such an intentional person. And it seems like you really have worked, with both your clients, but also even, as a partner in a marriage, about like being really intentional, because, your husband maybe didn't start out as intentional as you. So just jumping back a little bit to your FI journey, what types of jobs were you working as you were pursuing financial independence? Because, I think right now for the audience, it may be unclear, like, were you earning like a ton of money, like while you were pursuing financial independence?
No. So there are a few things happening. One, I think growing up in my situation, I didn't really ever self-identify as like, I'll be a high earner, or I'll work in like a super professional environment. Like, I just didn't see that as my kind of internal narrative trajectory. And so I never pursued that. I didn't go out and get a college degree. I just thought, I'll just work normal jobs and like live a normal life. And then my husband joined the military, and with moving and those kinds of transitions, I've worked just a lot of random jobs. And when I was in college, I managed coffee shops, and then we moved to DC. I managed coffee shops. I worked at REI. I worked for a church for a while. I worked selling high-end mattresses. When we moved to Germany, I went back to college, but I thought I would like HR and business management because I'd worked in businesses and I'd really loved, I'd managed large teams of people. I'd probably hired 100 people. I had, done hundreds of interviews. I'd fired a lot of people. I really enjoyed it. And then like first semester, I was like, this is so boring and unapplicable to any of the actual work of like running businesses or managing people, that I was like, I'm just going to study what I want to study. And I studied German, and I studied art, and I studied literature, and whatever class kind of seemed interesting at the moment. And then we came back, and I did commission sales of furniture. And so I probably averaged about $30,000 a year. Was about my income. My husband joined the military, but he was enlisted. And so he was like an E2 and an E3 and an E4. And while we had a housing stipend, which was amazing, and they covered insurance, which was amazing, his take-home pay was also kind of right in that $25,000 to $35,000 a year. So we never, as a couple, we never broke $100,000, even factoring in benefits and things like that. And so you have to kind of make trade-offs. And because I knew we weren't going to make like insane amounts of money, when I was, 19, 20, I got married at 19, I kind of realized like, okay, I can look rich or I can be rich, but I can't do both. Like, I'm just not going to be the person that makes enough money to do both of these things. So like, I have to choose. And for anyone who's grown up, kind of anywhere near that poverty line, there's an emotional baggage around looking poor and around feeling poor. And just like, you always worry that people are subtly judging you because you don't have enough money. And it's an awful feeling. And so there is this tendency sometimes when people start making money to like just spend to pacify that feeling. Like, I never want to feel that way again. I never want people to assume that about me again. And it took a lot of like intentionality and focus and sense of purpose to say, but what do I really want? Do I really want to look rich, or do I really want to be rich if I can't have both? And for me, it came back to, I want the options and the choices and the freedom that money can give me. And like, no designer clothes can give me that. Like, it just comes through investments. So yeah.
That's so powerful. And you're helping me kind of like understand my own journey, because similar to you, money was really tough growing up. Yeah. Like, I still have like, it's stressful for me to think about when like I needed new soccer shoes, just to like even ask my parents for money, because, money was so tough growing up. And, we were on like the free lunch program, and, we weren't like poor, like we had like a house, but we were like the lowest or lower part of middle income, where like it's kind of like money is a constant stress.
Yeah.
And, money, most likely led to my parents' divorce or it was a large contributing factor. And I really relate to the looking rich versus being rich, because when I finally started making money, I was all about looking rich for pretty much like 8+ years.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where I just never wanted to like feel that way again.
Yeah.
And so I spent like crazy, like always buying new clothes and eating out every single meal and living in a really nice condo. And even though I was actually making pretty good money, like I had nothing to show for it. Like, I spent an 8-year career in the Hollywood nightclub business, and you can make a lot of money in the nightclub business, but everyone kind of in that industry, and specifically in Hollywood, is all about looking the part. Looking rich, but like many of them have like a negative net worth or like a no net worth. And I had a negative net worth. And by the time I finally left the industry, I was like, despite making $150,000, $250,000 a year, I left in debt.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I discovered kind of financial independence where I had to start to make that decision. Like, do I want to become rich or do I just want to look rich?
Yeah.
And, I think the first step towards that was as I began to I had to restart my career. As I started to find success in a new career that was much more kind of like aligned with my long-term vision, value, and goals, I had to make that decision like, okay, I'm not going to upgrade like the car. I actually sold my Range Rover and got a Prius. Yeah. Like, because in Hollywood, I was driving the fancy car too.
Yeah.
And then I was like, what the heck? This thing, like, I'm spending like, thousands of dollars just on maintenance, not to mention the premium gas that it took, and then not upgrading to the nicer place. Like, even though technically in one sense we could totally afford it.
Yeah.
And I had to go through that process. So I know you originally, similar to kind of my own start, you started your journey in debt, right? Mm-hmm. How much debt did you and your husband carry before you started your journey?
Yeah, altogether $55,000. So he had about $10,000 of credit card debt and about $35,000 of student loans. Mm-hmm. And then actually, unbeknownst to me at the time, I had about $10,000 of medical debt. I had been hospitalized my senior year of high school, and I was under the impression that insurance had covered it, and it hadn't. And I was 18 at the time. I just turned 18 a week before. So it was in my name. And I didn't actually find out until a couple of years later.
Oh, wow.
That this debt had gone to collections. And
so your credit was terrible too.
Well, I mean, I had no credit. I had never done anything to establish any sort of credit. But I think almost all of us go through that experience where you're making good progress and you feel like, oh, I've got this and I've got this together. And then something so unexpected comes in and it feels like it just crushes you and derails you. And in a lot of different journeys, I think, we're going to have these setbacks, and it's how do you regroup? How do you keep hope? How do you keep going? And that was definitely a moment for me. We had finally, at that point, we'd gotten out of all of our other debt. We had saved our emergency fund, and then surprise.
So how did you overcome that? Because that kind of you're making massive headway, and then it's this kind of surprise, you're not done yet. Yeah. How did you actually deal with that?
So I spent a lot of time kind of negotiating on the phone because it had gone to collections. The collections didn't want to give it up.
Yeah.
But I had to convince them in the hospital that I was never notified. I was never told about this. It's not really fair that it went to collections if you It's been 4 years and I've never been notified once. Like I've never received a bill. And so I convinced the hospital to take the debt back.
Oh.
And then we set up an agreement that they would cut the amount in half if I could pay, so from 10 to 5, if I could pay half up front, which was $2,500, and then make $500 payments a month. And that, that was manageable, especially because we were still in the save half mode. We were still saving half. And so we could, it kind of slowed down, it like sidetracked our progress, but it was a possibility that we could do that. And even when sometimes people are like, kind of anti-financial independence because they see it as such a long road, which it is. It took us 13 years. It's not like a short amount of time, but saving half of your income, you'll feel the benefit of that every day. When you get a surprise $10,000 medical bill, it's like, oh, I'm so glad we're on this trajectory. I'm so glad that we're doing this, because it just, living paycheck to paycheck or living in debt is stressful. It's an emotional burden, and it takes a lot of emotional energy. Where when you have this huge amount of margin in your budget, when bad things happen, it's definitely not fun, but you're like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
We actually just took our truck in because we're about ready to leave on a big road trip for 8 months. So we took our truck in to do something simple and small. And they called back and they're like, yeah, that's going to be like a $3,000 bill. And I was like, okay, not my favorite news, but okay, that's fine.
Hey there, just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. Today's show is brought to you by Veg Nutrition. Live better. So I'm actually a veg elite athlete, and before I joined the team, I spent months doing my due diligence to make sure that the company was vision, mission, and value aligned with me, my values, my mission, my vision, and my lifestyle. I got to know the owners super well. I even got to know the person who formulates all the products, and they passed with flying colors. So I couldn't be more excited to represent a company that I feel so aligned with. And I want to tell you about two of my favorite products. The first is the Veg Pre-Workout. So when I first went vegan, or mostly vegan, the last thing for me to go fully vegan was finding a vegan pre-workout that gave me the focus, the energy, and the power that I was looking for. And I can tell you, this is the best pre-workout that I've ever had. It gives me incredible focus and energy. And what's probably the best is it leaves me with no crash after I take it, which is great. And the flavors are so freaking good. There's literally peach mango and a Patriot Pop that tastes like, the firecracker popsicles, cherry lemon lime flavor. They're literally so good that I can dry scoop them. And they just released a watermelon flavor for just in time for summer, and it's incredible. So that's the first product. The second product is arguably also my favorite, and that's the plant protein. It comes in 3 incredible flavors: chocolate peanut butter, vanilla ice cream, and cold brew coffee. Yep, you heard me. Cold brew coffee flavor. It tastes incredible, all 3 flavors. 25 grams of protein, fully organic, incredible ingredients, heavy metal tested, and it is my go-to post-workout. Make sure that I'm recovering and refueling and giving my muscles the protein that they need to rebuild for that next workout. So go to vegnutrition.com/dragon and try their full line of supplements, and you'll get 15% off. Or you can just use Dragon at checkout and you'll get 15% off. So that's vegnutrition.com/dragon to get 15% off. Veg Nutrition. Live better. Yeah. So I want to draw out because I think that's incredibly valuable insight that you shared about your medical debt. And it's actually the same for credit card debt too. Yeah. Like the ability to actually negotiate it down. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people don't realize that like you can actually radically reduce your outstanding debt if you're willing to get on the phone and negotiate. Because at the end of the day, they just want to collect some money versus no money. Yeah. And I think like that is, once you understand that, it gives you so much like more kind of like power, because you're like, wait a minute, I could reduce this. Like you cut it in half, like 10,000 to 5,000. That's like, you basically just earned yourself an extra $5,000 in one phone call, like by having that conversation. And so, you know, I really want to encourage the audience, like if you do have, like, if you're buried in a mountain of debt, which a lot of people are, I mean, you coach people, I coach people, and I have clients who are like buried in debt, and they just like, I'm never going to be able to get out from under this. And I think once you recognize that, like, wait a minute, you could actually, in a sense, maybe earn $5, $10, $20, $30,000 from a few phone calls if you're willing to negotiate. Like that is like a massive amount of like personal power that person's able to take into their own hands when it comes to their money journey. So I really appreciate you sharing that part of your story. I actually kind of forgot that's something I did too. I had a lot of outstanding debt myself. I was $80,000 in debt, and I actually ended up hiring somebody who did the negotiation on my behalf, but he actually negotiated down like all my debts, and he helped me actually like repair my credit at the same time. So I think a lot of people are unaware that like, A, that's something you can personally do, and then B, you can actually hire people to do this on your behalf. And yes, like you're already in debt, so like paying someone to do it does cost money, and it might like temporarily make you go into more debt, but in the long run, like if they negotiate, you know, 10,000 off your bill and they only cost like, you know, 500 or 1,000 to use, you still came out like, you know, $9,000 ahead. So that's super powerful. Okay. So when, you know, it took you 13 years to become financially independent. You and your husband never made over $100,000. You know, you both kind of maxed out around like 30,000 a year. When did you start your entrepreneurial journey? Like where you were like, okay, we're financially independent now. Like, what do I really want to do? Because there's two parts to that. One, I think a lot of people think like, oh, like I hate my job. I just like want to retire forever and like, you know, never work again. So walk us through like, you know, when you hit financial independence, did you take one of these like mini retirements, or did you immediately start an entrepreneurial thing? You know, I know like the real estate would be considered like an entrepreneurial journey, but you've done so much more than that, you know, in terms of like really kind of following some of your more artistic entrepreneurial journeys. So walk us through some of that.
Yeah, you're right, when we hit financial independence, we had taken a number of mini retirements up into this point because, like I said, I was in this mindset of we're not going to be fine until we're like 60 or 55. And there's seasons in our life, there's opportunities that if we don't do them now, they'll pass us by. So we had already kind of practiced this, which I think is an important point. It can be tough to jump into a mini retirement if you've never done anything like it before. Like the first time for everything is the most challenge. But we had a track record. We had lots of experience. And so it was a pretty natural choice for us. I didn't view it as let's retire forever because we weren't, you know, we were FI, but it wasn't like FI 200% or FI like 400%. Like it was just FI. And so I said, let's just take a year off. Let's take a year off. We had honestly had such a busy couple years. You know, we had bought 3 houses. We had done lots of renovations. We had adopted 3 kids and we had a baby. So our kiddos went from 1 to 5 in a 2-year span. And we were just tired. I mean, deeply, deeply tired. So we decided to take a year off. And, it was kind of a let's regroup, let's rest, let's catch up on some of the things that we've missed out on. Because, especially we had lived in Europe, so we had traveled a ton when we were there, but we came back and we, were adopting these kiddos from foster care, and we weren't allowed to leave our town during that whole period. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of landlocked for a couple of years during that adoption process. So we wanted to travel, we wanted to go visit our friends, we wanted to visit our family. But in that, I kind of wrote a list of all the things that we wanted to do. And one of the little items on the list was something to do with writing. Now here again, kind of the mindset and the environment I grew up in. I grew up in Montana, smack dab in the middle of wheat and cattle country, like vast, vast plains all around us in a small town of incredibly hardworking people. And in kind of this lower income family where, man, you don't do a job where you don't get paid on Friday. Like you have to buy food on Friday. You need something that will pay the bills every single week. And anything outside of that is risky and it's dangerous. And it's for like other people, for people who have more influence or more privilege or more wealth or can like squander their lives away and it doesn't matter. Was kind of like all of that internal messaging. So while I did always want to be creative and I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, it felt unrealistic. It felt indulgent. It felt like something for other people, but not for like practical people like me who had to pay the bills. And so becoming financially independent was a big personal shift for me of, wait, okay, so the bills are paid. I paid my dues. I did put in the hard work. I've got those covered. What do I actually really want to do? What do I want this next chapter in my life to be like? And so I started with something to do with writing, and I translated that into I'll start a blog and I'll start a newsletter and I'll start creating content. And, it's been actually in like a week or two, it's been 7 years, coming up here real quick, that I kind of started this. But it was an exploring, and it was a big self-reflection growth point for me, because for the first time, I really started to question those assumptions and those narratives that I had absorbed. Like I had mentioned, one of those was that I would never be a high income earner. I just never self-identified with that, partly because of my upbringing, partly because I'm a helper. Like I just love helping people, and I wanted to go into kind of a helping profession. And there is a strong narrative of like, if you care about people and help people, you will never make any money. And I had just taken that at face value.
Yeah.
And it was, it was maybe a year or two into my creative journey that I was like, wait a minute, is this true? Like, why exactly do I think I can't earn a higher income? Like, I'm smart, I'm hardworking, I have skill sets. Like, what do I think about me doesn't fit into that group? And there wasn't anything. There wasn't anything that disqualified me. And I was kind of like, okay. Not that I have to be that, but I'm not trapped in this old identity that I had just taken on. So yeah, it was definitely a growing point for me.
Yeah. So I'm really curious, like, so you had this limiting belief that you couldn't be a high earner.
Yeah.
Like, how did you like overcome that? Like, first it sounds like you became aware of the limiting belief. Yeah. Then, like, were there any practical steps that you could share of, like, how you actually overcame that and started to work your way out of that limiting belief?
Yeah, I think it starts with kind of like how we talked about money stories. It started with, like, where did this idea come from? Where did it begin? How did I absorb it? How did I interpret it? Like, were those generalizations, or were those something specific about me that said, actually, no, you are disqualified from being a high income earner? Once I realized that it was just kind of situational and not actually having anything to do with me. It wasn't any of the choices I had made. Then I started to look at other people I knew that were really successful and that were high income earners. And I started to spend time with them, and I became friends with them. And I figured out, like, what was that combination of things they had? They were good at building relationships. And I was like, well, I'm good at building relationships. They were a little bit smart, but you know what? They weren't that smart. They were like an average amount of smart. And I'm like, I think I'm that smart. They were hardworking. They were passionate. And I was like, I'm passionate and I'm hardworking. Like, there's actually not much different between us. Like, maybe this is a group that not just socially I belong in, but maybe a group I professionally belong in. And so I think it's kind of those two phases. Like, where did this idea even come from? And like, do I have the same qualities of people in this category? And sometimes we see ourselves as different because we've just never applied these success qualities to that area of our life. Think about like your coaching clients in like nutrition. Like, maybe they've just never applied this hard work and this passion and this focus that they have in other areas of their life to their health. Like, it's not that they don't possess it. They've just never focused it on this part of our life. And it's the same in finances. Sometimes their finances are a mess. But you know what? They are smart. They are hardworking. They are focused. They are organized in other areas of life. We can just channel it and shine that light on this area of life. And I had just never focused and channeled these attributes towards a real entrepreneur kind of creative part of me before.
Yeah. That's so key. I think taking an area of your life where you're really successful, and everyone has at least one, if not several, and applying that same kind of mindset to another area of life that you want to be successful in, and starting to identify, like, that is the mindset that you inhabit, and that is the lifestyle that you live in that particular area. Because one of the things I talk about, with my clients is taking on the mindset and the lifestyle of being both fit and rich. Because I think there's, even just in that dichotomy, I think there's a lot of people, well, I can't be really fit and really wealthy. I can be one or the other. And I'm like, no, that's not true. Just like you can be, really awesome at like reading books and, cooking in the kitchen. Like, it's just two different things. Like, you can be a great cook and a great reader. Like, why can't you be, fit and rich? Like, what are the things you do in your cooking and your reading that make you super successful? What is the mindset? And I think the first part of that mindset is like, giving yourself permission to be great in this new area of life, right? Like, okay, I've done it in another area of life, so I can do it in this area of life. So super powerful. I really appreciate you sharing that. All right, well, let's talk about your book, because I'm like in the thick of it. Like, I just launched this like coaching program for, around fitness and money back in July. I launched my podcast in May, and the imposter syndrome, like, just like all the insecurities that come up. So you wrote this incredible book called Fire the Haters, which is, really a deep dive into, becoming a creative online and out in the world, not just like a at-home creative who, maybe does arts and crafts, but never shares it with the world. So let's dive into that a little bit. Like, why did you write the book? as the first question?
So, two reasons. The second reason would be these are my people. Like I said, I started hanging out with other creatives and other entrepreneurs and other business people, and I just love this group of people. And these are the things we talked about, and these are the things that we processed and that we were growing in and learning in. And so for my first book, I wanted to write a book to like people I feel such a deep connection and like kinship with. And then the first reason is that, boy, this was tough for me. Like I struggled so tremendously through this learning curve. And it was figuring it out was like personal suffering, plus constantly researching, constantly looking at who's out there doing this well. How do they deal with this? How do they think about this? How do they manage this? Like, what works? And I felt like the first, 3 or 4 years of this journey was just like, like struggling through it and constantly like scanning the horizon to be like, there's got to be a solution. And as I figured it out and as I learned it, I just thought, why did I have to spend like 3 or 4 years suffering through this? Like, these aren't horribly complicated ideas. These aren't super technically challenging concepts. Like, maybe I'll just gather up all of this collected wisdom and just put it in like a simple, easy field guide book to save everyone else, not just the pain of going through it, but maybe to save their creative and entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah.
Because there were so many times I almost quit and I almost gave up because I thought, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm not wired and designed to deal with this kind of criticism and critique.
Yeah.
And I just, because I love this group of people so much, like, I feel like we need what they have to offer. And I didn't want anyone to get sidetracked or slowed down or, heaven forbid, kicked off the path for things that, like, there's a manageable solution. Like, there's a different mental framework that can keep you in the game.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to kind of, suss out a little bit more my own kind of journey over the, and it hasn't just been since this year. It's been like a long time coming. I remember when like I first started blogging and, putting written content online, I was like so sensitive. It was like I had the most sensitive skin in the world. And like, if like everything from if someone like said something, somewhat critical to like, what if no one says anything? Yeah. And like, oh, should I even do it if no one even like says anything or replies or comments or anything? And I think you make this amazing point in the book towards the end where you say like, would I write a blog if only 100 people read it? And you're like, yes. Would I write a blog if only 50 people wrote it or read it? And you were like, yes. And then you eventually, you ask yourself, what about if only like 10 read it? And you're like, no. But then you settled on 15. If 15 people would read it, you would write it. And I thought that was brilliant because if I had read that sooner and asked myself that same question, I think I would have had a lot faster of a journey because in the beginning of my kind of creative journey online, it felt like, almost nobody was paying attention to any of it. And, eventually kind of a few years into it, I got to this point where I was like, hey, if I just like impact one person, like it's worth it for me just to have one person like reach out and say, hey, that really resonated with me. Or because I read your article, I went and did XYZ. But I went through probably a few years before I got to that point of like the angst, the like, oh, I'm not good enough. Like, why am I even doing this? And like, I wish I had read your book back, when I first started my journey many, many years ago. So absolutely loved that part. Let's talk about imposter syndrome, because that was like something I really, and I think anyone who wants to start creating online is like, who am I to, write about this or make a video about this or create a business around this? Even I, as I started my coaching business, was like, who am I to start a fitness and money coaching business? So this is very relevant for me.
Yeah, it's tough. I have a chapter specifically about imposter syndrome, but then there's another chapter called The Myth of the Experty Expert. Mm-hmm. And I think that it plays into this imposter syndrome because we're scanning the environment and we see people who legitimately have more knowledge than us. They have more experience than us. They're better than us. Like any metric. And we think, well, wait, how do I fit into this? Like, what good is my contribution or my voice or my product when like there's something else here that most people would say they have more experience. And I think it takes a mindset shift of you have to be the absolute best in your field to have any value, to be able to make any contribution to each person, especially an entrepreneur or creative. There is some combination of your background, of your skill set, of your story, of the way you connect with people, of your voice that is going to resonate with someone the most.
Yeah.
Like you will be the perfect fit for someone. And it might be your price point. It might be your availability. It might be a lot of different things that, there's not one graphic designer that is the right choice for every single human in the world. Like that's not feasible. We need lots of people. We need lots of therapists. We need lots of coaches. We need lots of authors. Like we can't just say, well, he's the best author. He has to write all the books.
Yeah.
Or she's the best singer. She gets to sing all the songs. Like it doesn't work that way. Like, there's a resiliency and a value in variety. And so realizing, here's another kind of, it seems odd, but another point. Sometimes the person who's the furthest in the journey isn't the right fit for you. So taking myself as an example, we paid off a lot of debt. We've been on this personal finance journey for 20 years now. You could say, well, she's the most experienced, so I should hire her to help me pay off debt. Honey, that's been a long time ago.
Yeah.
I barely even remember that.
Yeah.
Like it's so distant from me. And so I rarely coach people in that phase of their journey. Because you know who you need? You need the person who's a few steps ahead of you.
Yep.
You need the person who's been in the thick of it in recent memory, because they're going to be able to empathize and they're up to date on like all of the information the most. I actually usually coach people who are towards the end of their FI journey or in the middle of their FI journey. And they're looking at how do I take, this progress I've made and how do I translate that into a life that I love, either whether that's through a career change or an entrepreneurial project or a mini retirement or something like that, because I've been through that. Like I've been in the thick of that for the last, 8 or 9 years. Like I've been living it day in and day out. And so, I think that's part of like that imposter syndrome of like, where do I fit in? Am I good enough? Like you're the best person for someone. I use an example of the book of, I have an email newsletter. It is not the best email newsletter by any measure of the imagination. Like I can think of 100 off the top of my head that are better than mine. And yet people will email me and say, yours is my favorite.
Yeah.
Yours is the one. I search my inbox in case I've been on vacation and I go back through and I read all of them. And it's not the best. So like, know that you bring value, even if you don't feel like you're technically the most experty expert. And then the other side of imposter syndrome, I think about it as like a physical feeling, a physical emotional sensation that we're going through. And it feels like, it can kind of feel awful. Like you can feel like tense, you can feel nauseous, you can feel butterflies, like you just feel out of your depth. And there's a couple things that cause that. But knowing that like outside of your comfort zone is where all of that growth happens. And if you're growing, like if you're outside of your comfort zone, you will feel uncomfortable. Like that's normal. That's like the way you should be feeling. I liken it to, if someone has like knows absolutely nothing about exercise, they've never exercised, they've never been in a gym, like they somehow lived on Mars and missed the whole thing. And they go to the gym and they're on the treadmill and they're like walking and then like they start sweating and they're like, wait a minute. There's like moisture coming out of my body. Like this, something must be horribly wrong. I should not be here. I should not be doing this. Like, I don't know what's happening, but like, I obviously have made an awful mistake, an awful life choice. But if you realize, actually, no, like it's okay. I know it feels a little uncomfortable, but like you're doing exactly what you need to be doing to get where you want to go.
Yeah.
Like, and reinterpreting that discomfort as I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm shipping something that matters. I'm doing work that I'm growing in. Like I'm doing something that's important. Like, yeah, I'm going to feel uncomfortable, but like that just means I'm in the right spot.
Hey there, just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. This show is brought to you by Feel Free from Botanic Tonics. This product is unlike anything I've ever had before. No joke. It's made with kava root and other ancient plants, and just half a shot gives me this incredible sense of focused flow and productivity. And I love to take just half a shot right before I work out. I take it with my pre-workout, and it takes my workouts to the next level. It is seriously unlike anything I've ever had. It's also an incredible productivity tool for any big work projects that you have or long periods of time where you just need to be super focused in flow state and get a lot of shit done. So if you want to give this a shot, you can go to botanictonics.com and use code DRAGON at checkout to get 40% off your first order. No joke, 40% off with code DRAGON. That's Feel Free from botanictonics.com, code DRAGON. Feel free, feel good. Yeah. I think, that's such a good point. When I launched my podcast and my coaching program, I was so uncomfortable. I could not sleep more than 6 hours. I just could not. I would no joke, Jillian, this year when I launched the coaching program, I was waking up, no joke, between 12 and 2 a.m. Just could not sleep. And so my only workaround around it was to go to bed incredibly early so I would at least get 6 hours of sleep, knowing that I was both excited and scared out of my mind.
Yeah.
Because I'm I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But, in that discomfort, if I just reframe that as I'm growing like crazy.
Yeah.
And it's no wonder I can't sleep because I'm going through a huge growth spurt and it's really uncomfortable, but it's I'm now evolving into a whole new person in the world, and it's going to be super uncomfortable, but that's great because it means I'm actually transforming. You know what I mean? I am coming out of the cocoon, and I absolutely love that whole. I love how you painted the picture someone who'd never worked out. They start sweating for the first time. And they're like, "What is this?" That's so true in any endeavor, but especially any sort of creative or entrepreneurial adventure. Is it is super comfortable because A, you're doing things you've never done before.
Yeah.
B, you're doing that at a level that you've never even maybe even considered, prior to before you started. So I think a really kind of important part, and this is really, part of my journey, is I feel like I was stuck in preparation for years. Like, no joke, thinking about a podcast and a blog for probably thinking about a blog for 15 years, 10 years before I started the blog, but then, had been thinking about a podcast for 10 years before I launched it, thinking about the fitness and money coaching program for literally 5 years before I actually got it off the ground. Walk us through some frameworks that someone could apply to the stuck in preparation.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a chapter called Procrastination via Preparation.
Yeah.
And I think because people sense that discomfort, they think, well, if I just prepare enough, I can skip that discomfort. And soon as I'm ready and everything's perfect,
I'll start when I'm ready.
Yeah. Yeah. As soon as it's perfect, then I don't have to deal with that discomfort of it not being perfect. And it's a myth. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. If we tie it back to fitness, if you're as soon as I can run a 5K without being winded, then I'll start training. Okay, but you're not actually thinking about running a 5K isn't actually going to prepare you, get you ready to do that. You get ready to run a 5K by running.
Yeah.
Shockingly enough. And, I had a situation, and this is I don't know, it was so painful, so uncomfortable. When I started my podcast, Everyday Courage, we'd spent 6 months getting it ready, getting the graphics, getting the guests lined up, doing all of the things to make it awesome. And I had studied all of my guests. I had pages of notes. I knew, all of the episodes I was going to do. I flew to Virginia to a recording studio. We spent all week. We recorded 25 episodes, and just man, it felt like blood, sweat, and tears was poured into this project. And it honestly was the very best that I had. I left nothing on the table. And I come out of this week, I'm exhausted mentally, emotionally, physically. You wouldn't think podcasting is kind of physical, but if you record 25 hours of podcasts, you're physically tired. And I'm driving to the airport, and I put on a podcast between Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Big Magic, and Rob Bell. And it is brilliant, and it's funny, and it's insightful, and it's just sparkling and engaging. And I start crying, tears coming down my face, because I'm what I just did is shit. And it was the best I could do. Everything I just created was mediocre and subpar, and it was my very best. And Neil Gaiman kind of tells this story, and I had talked about it in the podcast. So it was very fresh in my mind, of this idea that we get into things because we have good taste.
Yeah.
Whether it's writing or music or fitness, you have good taste. That's why you become a cook. But what you produce falls short of your taste.
Yep.
And it's very uncomfortable for people who have good taste. And the only way to keep improving is to put out work that falls short of your taste. And he says that's where people get stuck. That's where people give up. Because it's so frustrating to produce something that's not up to the taste that you have, the standard that you have. And I think about it like dry stocking a wall. You know where you want the top of the wall to be. And every stone you stack falls short of where you want the wall to be. And the only way to get there is to continue to stack one rock on another, each of them falling short of where you want that finished product to be. And it that realization hit me of oh my God, the only way I'm ever going to be able to make a podcast like this one I'm listening to is by continuing to produce stilted, mediocre podcasts. There's no way you can, preparation yourself to perfection. You just have to do it.
Yeah. It's like, I'm so glad you said that. I had just actually read that portion of the book either yesterday morning or this morning. And I was like, that's exactly how I feel right now. Yeah. Like, I don't even have, as of today, I have the 19th episode out, and I'll listen to like my favorite podcasters. And I'm just like, oh, they're so much better than me. But then I forget they've been doing it for like 10 years or more. Yes. And I'm like, they've done thousands upon, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of hours of, yes. interviewing, preparation. They have amazing production teams and all this stuff. And it's just like, you know what? Like, hey, like they had to go through what I'm going through, and remembering that they had to go through what I'm currently going through, like it gives me like, energy to keep going. Cause it's like, if I just keep going, I'm gonna get better. The only way I stop getting better is if I stop. And like, it's just like, like sometimes I get like, I literally feel like, oh man, my podcast sucks compared to theirs. But I think you made this other incredible point. Like, even with something like a podcast or really any creative endeavor, maybe my podcast is just right for someone at a particular part in their journey. And they're like, they resonate with me, my voice, my message, more than the people I idolize. Maybe they don't even know the people I idolize. Like, so like, why not me? Right. And you make this incredible point in the book about like, why not me? Like, why not me? Like, why can't I be someone's favorite? And you mentioned that with your newsletter. It's like, there's tons of newsletters that are probably, objectively much better than yours, but like, you're still somebody's and probably many people's favorite. So like, why not you? That's such a powerful part of the book. So kind of the last piece that I want to cover before
I have one thing I want to share.
Sure.
One thing I want to share with you. So I had someone apply for coaching like a week or two ago, and I have this application process, and some of it's, like normal things, like what kind of change are you looking for? How do you want your life to be different? Why do you feel stuck? But at the very bottom, it's like, what's your favorite books? What's your favorite quotes? Your favorite podcasts? It really kind of helps give me a sense of like who they are. And a lady who applied a couple weeks ago said her favorite podcast is yours.
What? No.
Yep.
No.
Yep. And I was like, I know Justin.
Oh my God, you literally just gave me goosebumps and like made my whole freaking month. Yeah. I'm like, just because they're like, oh my God, wow, I think I'm blushing right now. Like, that's so cool. You sure you're not making this up right now?
I'll forward you the application.
Wow. That's so cool. Seriously. Like like my head is like vibrating right now because I'm just like, it's like one of those things that's like, oh my God, maybe I am on the right path. And, it's like a lot of times we doubt like, oh, it's like, am I on the right path? Like I've wanted to do this for so long, but like, am I really meant to do it? And like, wow, that was so special. I really appreciate you sharing that with me. And I want the audience to know that's like available for everybody, is like, you will connect with somebody, your art, your business, your whatever it is, the thing that you create will connect with somebody if it's coming from the place of like, you want to create this because there's something inside you that wants that to be unleashed in the world versus like, I'm going to do this to chase money. Right. Yeah. So, wow. Thank you, Jillian. I really appreciate that. So another, kind of big thing you and I kind of talked about before we hit record, and then also it is in the book, is like, how do you share with friends and family about like what you're doing when you take on this new, creative or entrepreneurial pursuit? Like, like when they don't understand you or they don't get what you're doing, like, How do you navigate that?
Yeah. And this, I would even expand this out to whenever you make any big life change, whenever you do something that's outside of the norm for your family's social circle, it's, there's some pushback. And earlier in the book, I talk about an idea of giving yourself the gift of being misunderstood. And I think that's so important when it comes to our family and friends, because the temptation is, I need to sell this to them. They need to be fully on board. They need to understand it. And they need to give me the certain kind of support I'm looking for. And they need to agree with me. And instead, I've taken a different mental approach. In one, they don't owe me anything. Like, there's no job requirement that says, like, you have to agree with everything and, support me in certain ways. So, like, let's take that off the table. But also, not everyone's going to have your vision. Your vision was given to you specifically. Your idea of what the future could look like in your work, in your life, in your relationships, in your health, like, that was given to you, not to them. So it's your job to understand it. It's your job to believe in it. It's your job to take action. It's not their job to understand it. Their job is to understand their vision for their life that they've been given. And so kind of letting people off the hook, like, it's okay that you don't understand. It's not really for you to understand. Like, it's for me to understand. And I see a lot of conflict created when people keep trying to sell an idea to their friends and family that their friends and family aren't buying. We talked about some of your coaching clients becoming vegan. Yeah. Like, and they keep trying to sell vegan, and their friends and family are like, no, thank you. Like, I don't get it. I'm not going to get it. I don't like it. I'm not going to like it. Like, yeah. And so, but it creates pressure and tension in relationships. One of the tools that I kind of employ in this is, and I give this freely to other people, and I try to receive it, is, I'm happy for your happiness. So to flip the conversation, there are people in my life who are making decisions I do not like. I do not agree with. They're making financial decisions that I think are a disaster and awful. And no matter how much they convince me that $1,200 car payment is a good idea, I'm never going to be on board. But I can be happy for their happiness. If they're happy about their car, if they're happy about the vacation they financed with a credit card, I'm happy for their happiness. Yeah. You don't always have to agree with people to be happy for their happiness. So if I'm in that struggle with someone who just doesn't agree with what I'm doing, who's vehemently opposed to it, to just say, I would love it if you could just be happy for my happiness. Like, this makes me really happy. If you could be happy for my happiness is a way to say, we don't have to agree. We don't have to be on the same page. You don't have to understand it. And here's a reality that's so painful, such a harsh realization when it comes to vision, is there's a large percentage of the population who will not see your vision until it's done. And sometimes they won't even see it until a couple years after it's done. They won't get it until it's right in front of them. I do a lot of construction, and there are some people who can look at blueprints, and they can look at the drafts, and they can look at all of it. And you'll see this on like home renovation shows, but they don't really see it until they walk into the finished project. And then they go, oh, this is nice. Yeah. Oh yeah, now I get what you were trying to explain to me. But like, all of the drafts and drawings and carpet samples and paint samples, like, do not compute in their head to what the reality will be like.
Hey there, just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. Today's show is brought to you by Fit Rich Vegan. If you're ready to get in the best shape of your life,
double your income, and 10x your savings and investments, then this is the coaching program for you. But wait a minute, Dragon. Isn't this your coaching program? Heck yeah, it is. I spent the last 8 years mastering my fitness and my finances, and I've built an incredible coaching program with an incredible team to help you get the body of your dreams and finally achieve that level of financial success that you've been seeking. So if you want to find out if you're a good fit for the program, go to fitrichvegan.com and book your free consultation today. Or you can just DM me on Instagram with the words FitRichVegan, and we can chat about if it's going to be a good fit for you. I'm committed to empowering people to actually achieve their fitness and financial goals. I spent the last 20 years trying to figure this out on my own. And what I realized is the key to doing it is not doing it alone. You have to have coaches, you have to have mentors, and you have to be a part of masterminds. And that's exactly what Fit Rich Vegan has. It has coaches, mentors, and it is a mastermind. So again, if you're ready to book your free consultation today, go to fitrichvegan.com or drop me a DM on Instagram.
Yeah. I think there's so much goodness in what you just said. I think, just letting your friends and family know what you need. Like, you don't need them to, like, be on board with it. You just need them to be happy that you're happy and that you're happy pursuing whatever it is that you're pursuing. That's all you need. You don't need them to do what you're doing or to buy your product or to read your book or listen to your podcast or take your coaching program, or buy your service. You just need them, if at all possible, for them to be happy that you're happy.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's too much to ask of friends and family.
Yeah.
So just letting them know that, I think is a big jump. And, I think that's so powerful, because then you go from trying to, like, convince or explain, like, what it is you're doing and, like, why it's so valuable to other people and why it's invaluable to you personally, to, like, hey, I just need your, like, love and support in the sense that, like, you're happy, I'm happy, and pursuing something I want to pursue.
Another really important mental framework that's helpful is not everyone has to be everything to you.
Yes.
We have different people in our lives who do kind of see the vision of this project or this thing. We have other people that share this commonality that can be their thing. When we bought our first house, man, it was in rough shape, and I was, like, showing my family it before, like, right after we closed, and my grandmother was like, "Oh, honey, you are not going to let my grandchild live here, are you?" And I'm like, "Yeah," like, but it's okay. Like, she's not my real estate person. She's not my renovation person. Like, I have other people in my life who fulfill that role, who we can talk about renovation budgets, and we can talk about fixing things up, and we can talk about the 1% rule and, like, all of these real estate things. Like, she doesn't have to be that for me. And I think sometimes we want the people that we love the most also magically transform into people who are interested in this. And, I have a coaching client right now he left his job. He's going to do some real estate things. And he's like, I know my mom's not going to be into it. Like, she doesn't get it. And I'm like, she doesn't have to be into it. She doesn't have to get it. Like, maybe she's super into gardening and you don't get it either. And he was like, oh my gosh, she is. She's a master gardener. She's so into gardening. And, like, I could care less. And I'm like, and that's fine in your relationship. She has other people in her life who are also super into gardening, who she can talk about plants and seeds and horticulture and fertilizer with. Like, you don't have to be that person for her.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have to be this person for you. We can find other commonalities with the people that we care about the most, other bridges, and that can be what we connect on.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll see a lot of pushback with friends and family because, to be honest, they didn't opt into this change. They
Yeah.
didn't get a vote. You are changing the dynamic without their permission. And that creates this feeling of helplessness and this feeling of fear. Like, what if they start judging me? What if we don't have anything in common? What if they berate me for not getting what they're doing? What if, they become resentful of me? Like, what if there's this chasm that forms between us? And I think it's our responsibility as the change makers to say, I'm going to build those bridges with you. There are things that we can talk about. There are experiences we can share outside of this new area of my life. Like, I'm not going to leave you behind. And sometimes that kind of energy shift will really help strengthen the relationship, and it'll heal some of those like unspoken fears.
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, myself included, when we go after a new pursuit, there's almost this like subconscious fear of leaving our loved ones behind.
Yeah.
But we're not. You know what I mean? We're never going to like completely, at least most of us aren't going to completely abandon like our true loved ones. You know what I mean? We may change our lifestyle. We may change what we do for work. We may pursue some creative, endeavor. But like, we're still going to love that person, and we're still going to like have them in the part or parts of our life that really make sense and where we do our, have shared interests and shared passion. And, giving yourself permission to pursue the thing, knowing that you're not really leaving any of the people you love behind. You're just going to go like do some other like things that you're passionate about and that you love. So absolutely beautiful, Jillian. There's so much more I could talk to you about, but I've taken a ton of your time. Are there any kind of, I want to definitely have you back on the show, because I think I want to do a like, let's talk about coaching like as like the number one topic, but let's save that for another interview. Maybe after you're done with your 8-month, mini retirement, or, if you're ever in front of a computer, and we can do it then. But are there any like last words of wisdom or thoughts that you want to share with the audience before we wrap this up?
I think kind of the theme of this chat kind of boiled down to the idea of change. Changing our finances, changing and growing in, things that we're curious about or interested in or passionate about, letting those interests become professions. And change is hard. Like, it just is. But it's not a go big or go home thing. I have a free little video course, and one of them is about testing and scaling. It's so easy to get stuck, especially when we have a big vision or big ideas or big goals. It's easy to get stuck in that preparation kind of mode.
Yeah.
And test and scale is, what can you do in 1 to 4 hours that will help you make a little bit of progress? Maybe you'll learn something, maybe you'll talk to someone, maybe you'll take kind of that first tactical step. And then after you get to that point, where do you pivot from there? Using the information that you've gathered, what's the next step that would take between 1 and 4 hours? And I see this all the time with coaching clients. Once we actually start taking these practical small steps, that overwhelm, that like, I have this huge dream for my life, but like, where do I start? That fades away, because now they're in like action mode. They're in forward progress mode. And all of that clarity that you need comes in doing the thing. It doesn't come from just sitting on your couch and thinking about the thing. It comes from taking steps that you'll get what you need along the journey. I gotta talk about like Legends of Zelda. Like, you don't get everything at the beginning of the game. As you go along the journey, you talk to the people and they give you information. You find the little pot of gold, you gather the tool, but like all of that comes on the journey. So I guess just finding this week, what's something that you could do in an hour that would get you going?
I love that. Jillian, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was such a pleasure to go deep and wide with you on subjects that we're both really passionate about. You bring so much value to this world, And I'm just so grateful to be able to, count you as, a friend and a colleague in the creative pursuits. So massive, massive thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was great to see you again.
Yeah. And your book, for the audience, it's Fire the Haters, available pretty much anywhere books are sold. And it's Jillian Johnsrud all over the internet on the socials. So definitely check out her work. She has a great podcast called Everyday Courage that is really, super inspiring and empowering. Check out her work if you haven't already, and do one thing that is gonna move you forward on your creative or entrepreneurial journey. Thank you, Jillian.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. And remember, literally everything can be used as an opportunity to learn, to heal, to grow, and to transform. So whatever is going on in your life, choose to consciously and proactively harness that energy and use it to alchemize your life to the next level. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or on your favorite social media, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. As always, you can find me at Justin David Carl on Instagram and all the socials, as well as at alchemizelife.com on the web. Until the next time, sending you lots of energy and plenty of dragon magic.